a little bit of a different look this evening. Welcome to another episode of the Motor City Metrics podcast here at TigersOnTheHillReport.com. I am Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Clay Snowden of Just Baseball. Mike should be joining us momentarily, and Chris is on assignment in Lansing as he went to go see start from Jaden Ham, and he got some eyes on Yover Sanchez and a couple other relievers. So we'll get to that a little bit. But first and foremost, wanted to thank our sponsors over at BetOnline. They're the number one source for all summer sports this season, including, concluded the Stanley Cup. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers. And you get all the latest stats, news, and sports available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including your team matchups, player props, and odds on just every sport out there, whatever's left. There's now a professional pillow fighting thing out there. There might be even some for that. That was something that I randomly scrolled through the other day. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get on the action. Bet online or the game starts. First and foremost, Clay, thank you for coming in. We appreciate it. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I always enjoy, chit-chatting with you about baseball. That's for sure.
Yeah, and this was a week for the Tigers where it was the Dave Dombrowski experience, and some of the things that I crack up about was that was what we had comments all last week on the show where they were called the American League Pirates. And it was funny because one of a beat writer put it on Twitter. It's like, fans been saying that for a while. It's nothing to surprise, but they go out and they lose a series to the Phillies, which, we expected at least the Tigers to get something, at least with Skubal on the mound to get that. But yesterday's game, it was kind of mostly charged a little bit. You had Spencer Turnbull come back. Although the Wenzel Perez called out strikeout. There's a lot of weird moments over the week that were just strange in general. But, Philly came in and didn't exactly punch him in the mouth necessarily per se. Suarez Skubal beat Suarez, which was a pitching matchup that we all expected to happen. But other than that, they started a 10-game road trip tonight, starting in Anaheim, a place where traditionally speaking, the Tigers have always, since the dawn of man, have always struggled. But I don't know, what were some of your impressions of the series? Because the bats, again, continue to struggle a little bit. There's just been, outside of Riley Green, the offense continues to putter along.
To me, that's pretty much it. Is that it's just solidifying what you're saying more and more. Every day we have more evidence of it. And every day you have one less day to fix it. One less day in the season to turn it around, and it looks less and less likely. And I just think at this point, they really are just what they are. And this is usually when you can start saying that, the turn into July, the turn into the All-Star game, trade deadline, when you really start to self-evaluate, you have that sample size. The Tigers just don't have the horses right now to score enough runs and compete. It is that simple. I think the pitching's in the right direction, not only in terms of the active roster, but development within the system, pitchers coming up. I think that they're doing well there. It's, the bats, they've got to figure it out. This team has underperformed even to, I think, most everyone's standards. We all thought that they would be not, putting up 11 runs a night, but definitely a more sustainable offense than what we've seen. So it's just kind of been a disappointing watch on a lot of nights.
Yesterday's loss was one of the disappointing ones to me, is because you get the Mark Hanna has kind of fallen off the face of the planet, which was kind of almost, you saw some of the trends last year a little bit where maybe perhaps expecting it, but what didn't expect it all to happen is that your bottom four, the bottom four of the order did absolutely buckus. It's just a thing where you look at, even like Perez has kind of cooled off a little bit, but I like what Demetrius said here. He sums it up perfectly. I was at the Tigers game yesterday when Matt Verling home run that tied it up. Other than that, absolutely nothing since then. Where's the energy after the 5-0 start? You know what? I don't know. I don't know where it is. And I think that, again, some of the blame that AJ Hinch has been getting, I think it's rather ridiculous a little bit, because he can only do so much. He's not one of those guys that's a rah-rah guy. He's a smart guy, and he's going to put the best lineup he possibly can. But as you said, there's just not enough bats there. And one of the things that mentioned too is, as far as like Tyler Holton going out there on a bullpen start, didn't do too bad, but kind of Montero is still having that same issue with his command, where a lot of his things, like he's just everything's over the plate. He just cannot. And the thing was, I noticed this even this year in Toledo, his swing and miss stuff is completely different.
I really like him, and I think that he can figure it out. He has one thing that's kind of tough to teach at times, which is the stuff. And I do think that he can be productive. He had 16 swing and misses or a large number of swing and misses yesterday against a good team. That doesn't happen by accident. The location is the issue, and you saw it. He walked a batter, boom, home run. That's where the issues fall with him. Again, how many times have we said trust this staff into helping these pitchers, and it's worked out? That's why I'm really encouraged by him, because he has the stuff to get swing and misses. B, the other parts of it are a little bit easier to refine, in my opinion. You don't have to try to make a 93 mile per hour fastball 97. You know what I mean? He's got that. So he has enough there. Now it's just about molding him, getting him more experience, learning how to pitch a little bit stronger, because when you fall behind in counts and he's going to try to work back with the fastball, that's where he's going to get beat at the major league level compared to AAA. You're down 3-1. Now I've got to go fastball here because he's not quite trusting his stuff yet. And boom, it gets taken,
No, that's a good way to put it, because I think the one thing that about him, I noticed this year compared to last year in Toledo, and maybe it's just a way that I think last year he was built, like he was at 3 levels last year. So I think has perhaps towards the end of the season made a little bit of fatigue a little bit with that. But I do notice that there's a little more experimentation and a little bit of confidence with them in terms of trying things out a little bit. But at the big league level, if you make a mistake, you're just going to get hit, and it's just a matter of command. But the swing and miss stuff is there. I think you're absolutely correct about that. Just in addition to not just a high, it's one of those things where people talk about how does high spin translate. In this case, it translates for him quite a bit of movement, and so long. I mean, you got like to see that. And the other part of it too about Montero that I think what I liked about the way they piggybacked on me yesterday too was they didn't have him start. I think that was better for his psyche overall, because Philly's such an aggressive hitting team that I think it allowed him a little bit to kind of maybe relax a little bit coming into the game.
Yeah, and I love that too. Just the idea letting the opener go out there, and it is different when you know you're going to start and you have all of that time leading up to the game and all of that time to think about it, and then you have the top of the order right off the bat. So I like what they did with him to bring him in. If I remember correctly, I think it was 6, 7, 8 in the lineup, or somewhere around the back part of the lineup when he did come in. And so I like that. They don't, here's the beauty of it. They don't have to rely on him to win games this year. Like, he was not part of the plan to come in and, hey, you're the number 5 now. We need you to produce. Like, they have other players ahead of him in the depth chart. I'm glad he's getting his time now. And if there were a trade or 2 trades, he'll get plenty of time. At that point, it's a lost season. Why not throw him out there and let him develop and let him work with the Tigers pitching coaches who have done so well to help mold some of these other guys who are ahead of him.
Yeah, and I think that does fare well to allow them to see what else they have in their system, because, I mean, normally it was by default, it was really Matt Manning, and we haven't really, and Manning hasn't really, to be perfectly honest, the last start I saw him in Toledo, then it's still the same issue. It's just a issue of, I think he tries too much with his fast, like just falls in love with a certain pitch, and then he gets in this rut a little bit. But Montero, I alongside, I think, I don't want to admit that maybe perhaps he might be better out of the bullpen, because I really want him to be a starter, but I still, maybe it's like a long, I think what the Tigers might do what they used to do with a lot of starters, is bring them out of the bullpen and slowly but surely put them in the rotation. So hopefully maybe something like that, which would be beneficial.
I also think that the idea of the starter is now a bullpen arm is a stamp of failure. A lot of people see it that way. I don't see it that way at all. There's 5 starters. That's it. A lot more bullpen pieces shifting in and out. There's plenty of fantastic relievers that were once starters as well. It's not this he has failed. It's we want to put him in the best position to succeed. And sometimes that's out of the bullpen. We saw that with Flores making that move this season. I don't think it's a sign of anything more than, hey, we think he'll pitch better by just focusing on 2 pitches, maybe 3 out of the bullpen. Like, I don't want people to kind of see that as this, it's a failure. I think that the Tigers have enough like coming up in the rotation that if they did do that, it's not the end of the world. I'm not the biggest Ty Madden fan, to be honest with you. It's nothing against him. It's just every time I watch him, nothing stands out. I said this last winter. I went back and watched every single one of his starts, and I just wasn't that impressed. If that's a guy who moves to the bullpen, maybe it looks different, and maybe we have a different opinion on him. But not to just change the subject.
No. You're actually this is actually a really good segue. So continue.
Yeah. So whenever I've watched him, it's not as much of a this guy's awful. It's more of a nothing looks plus to me. And I don't have all the advanced data on minor leagues, and I don't want it either, because part of it is like nice to have. Part of it would be me wasting all my time looking at it, but part of it too is just like, all right, let's see. I've watched enough baseball to understand like what looks right at the major league level and what looks like it could play at that level. And there's too many times that I see him just groove a fastball that's too hittable. And it's a similar thing we talked about Montero. He's not locating well enough, and he tries to battle back into counts. And at times you get away with it in the minors because you can blow your fastball past somebody, even if it's not a 99-mile-per-hour fastball. And I'm just a little bit worried about him as a starter. I don't personally see it. I hope I'm wrong. I could see him more as a bullpen arm.
So Troy in this chat real quick said, hopefully Larry pitches well to raise the stock more. I mean, his last 3 games he's got an ERA of like 0.90. So I hope so too. But we'll get to there's some Scott Harris discussion I want to get to. There's a couple comments, but getting back to what about Ty Madden, I thought last year watching him pitch in the postseason for Erie, where I think he had one point, he had a stretch like a 13 or it was like a 20 inning stretch where he was just dominant against lefties, where that was his biggest problem. However, that whatever he was doing in, AA, the AAA has been, you're right, Clay. Even like, for example, his fastball, like it's been kind of what it's been flat.
Yes.
And it's a lot of like his curveball, which can sometimes he snaps off a really good one and is able to locate his pitch. Like if he locates on the inside corner, which he was able to, I haven't seen him do that at all since he got to Toledo. And it's even where I even think the start where he was, he only like went 3 innings, struck out like 9, or he had a pretty high strikeout number.
Mm-hmm.
However, it was a lot of times where if he was playing a better team would have taken advantage of it, because it was just they were still making a lot of hard contact with that. And so nothing to me, I just, the one thing, even against a team like a team like St. Paul, for example, St. Paul they got some prospects in there, and he's been able to. It's just I'm trying to think of the best example of what Ty Madden reminds me of. He reminds me of a little bit of like in this. I'll give full credit to Chris, and the more I think about it, he is correct on it. Kind of reminds me of Kyle Funkhauser. Chris brought that up first, and you think about it, and you're like, and you're going, "Oh, how's that?" And then there's nothing that Funkhauser, like something like he got it, like he dominated AA, got to AAA, and wasn't able to use his fastball effectively to get some swing and misses, or even for that matter, draw soft contact. And it's a brilliant observation by Chris there, because I feel like he has that same kind of, I guess, upside, if you will, with that. Like kind of like you could see him maybe as a 1-2 inning guy.
Yeah, and I was watching the other day, and he got a called strike 3 on the middle inside part of the plate, and I was just thinking, like, that's just not going to happen in the majors. And I know there's sequencing involved, what pitch did he throw before, all that, but like, my point about that tweet was, listen, a major leaguer fouls that off, even if he's looking curveball, he's going to be able that caught way too much of the plate. It's either damage or it's live to see another pitch. Are you going to go back with a fastball, or now do you have to throw a breaking ball for what starts to look like a strike and breaks away? Like, that's where it gets harder, is if these major leaguers are fouling off kind of your pitches that fool them a little bit. Now you're going deeper into counts. They've seen your fastball this many times. They've seen your secondary this many times. How do you adjust within the at-bat? And that is something that I just think he has a long ways to go. I don't know if there's going to be some type of a tweak or some type of a movement to him to the bullpen or what, but I'm just not as optimistic as a lot of people have been on Madden.
Yeah, my optimism is kind of fading a little bit, unfortunately, and I want to believe that he will be able to turn around, but we'll have to see. I mean, honestly, I understand. Like, I was even on I was still skeptical heading into the season, going, okay, well, if you're gonna make an adjustment to Toledo, then he'll be fine. But it hasn't been the case at all. So Sky Harris was recently on the Have a Seat podcast, which is the podcast, I believe, with Jason Benetti and Dan Dickerson. And of course, for anybody that covers the Tigers, it's, the questions are going to be very, even though those two being Dickerson and Jason Benetti have cachet, they do, but then the questions are going to be nothing like it's not, they're not going to gotcha questions or anything, but
those questions are likely somewhat approved. You know what I mean? Like, they know what's coming. They're not going to come up with anything that's unexpected.
Yeah, old BK in the chat said softballs. No, absolutely. It's going to be, I don't want to say softball. Maybe softball's a little bit spin because those two are a little different, but they're not going to go out. Yeah, you're right. They're not going to give anything hard and they're approved. They're definitely going to be approved. And so one of the things that he said, you talk about as the Tigers, this is a comment. This article was pulling some comments and it said, the Tigers are currently navigating their 8th consecutive losing season, a fact that has understandably frustrated fans. Despite the pressure, Harris has opted to prioritize long-term growth over quick fixes. Quote, one of the differences between me and fans is I'm really emotional when I watch the Tigers, but I actually have to divorce emotions from decision-making. I have to push the organization forward in a healthy, constructive way. That means building it the right way. That doesn't mean chasing shortcuts, end quote. What? That by the way, that podcast is pretty good too. But
oh yeah,
I listened to the podcast and then I wanted to pull the quotes. Like, what does that mean to you? I mean, what is that like? I'm a little. I know what I think. I know what it means. I'm going to do the Harris interpretation thing I used to do with the Avila's interpretation thing. But what does that mean to you?
Well, before I even get into that, I want to first say that these GMs don't owe us anything. Like, you can listen to every GM thing in the world, every interview. They don't owe you anything, and they don't have to tell you the truth, because guess what? It doesn't matter. How often have we seen, these people say, well, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. Then they do it. They also don't want to give out too much information. So I never read too far into these. However, like, I see where people want to, and it comes from his mouth. It's why would I not believe him too? You know what I mean? Like, I get both sides of it. But the way I see it is, he is saying, like, we are not going to just be too aggressive, throw stupid money out there, getting bad contracts, trade away prospects for short-term fixes. Like, we're not going out, like, the Tigers are not going out there and trading Clark McGonigal and getting back Vlad Jr. to replace Spencer Torkelson, who enters, and then Vlad is gone after next year. And it's, oh my gosh, we don't have anything in the farm now. They're not going to do that. Longer term plan is kind of what I saw, which, I realized they have, not only have the Tigers not won recently, they haven't had a first half record over 500 since 2016. So, like, you usually know that they're out of it. Like, before you go on your summer vacation, you come back home, and the Tigers are already out of it.
Yeah, it's I can always tell based off the downloads too. The downloads trail off after a certain period of time, where it's like it's like, gee, thanks a lot, guys. We appreciate that. Not the people listening, but you know what I mean. Like, if the Tigers do a little better, I know the downloads would be up. But I could, in terms of healthy, constructive way, I understand. Look, the farm system has made strides, and it has. And we've talked about this numerous times between myself, you, and Chris. there is things to hang your hat on. Absolutely, no doubt. But when I'm looking at that is that I understand what he's trying to say is like, look, hey guys, I'm the one that has to pull the trigger here, and I have to do that. And what Tim said in the chat was it means the owner's sheep. I mean, he ain't too far off from that either. I mean, there's just like well, however, again, when I think about when I was at the end of the year presser, and when he was asked about free agency, and he just gave this weird look like, why would we spend a lot of money on free agency? You can spend smartly, or you can make trades that are going to benefit you and be like to give you some of the advantages, some sort of advantages. So he talked about he's talking about he mentioned how the Tigers have adopted what he refers to as a high variance offense, or just
Bad.
not consistent. Is that to me? It's just another word for not consistent, or we can't really hit.
Do you know what's funny about that is, it's not that it's high variance. It's that it's bad, and it just happens that you play 162 games, and no matter what, some teams are going to score 11 runs when you play them. Like the Oakland Athletics, I've seen them score 14 runs this year. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There's randomness when you have that large of a sample size. It's not high variance. It's just kind of the random things that happen on occasion. It's bad. There's no other way to paint it.
Yeah, because I think of like high variance. It's like one game you score 8 runs, the next game you score 2. But
Yeah.
it reads like binary code 11100 1111110. It's Tigers offensive binary code. Period. I mean, it's just the occasional what we saw in Atlanta last week, or I'm sorry, against Houston, who a guy you're supposed to see Justin Verlander, he got scratched, and they took somebody else on, so that the Tigers lucked out there. But here's the thing: when he was talking about his this is where the offense he was talking about the young players. He said, well, the best players in baseball often struggle really early in their career. We can't just jump off the train with some of the young guys because we're going to miss some really good years in the future, Harris said. I don't think anybody look. I know some people have been impatient about Cole Keith, and Cole Keith has been hitting better since the beginning of May. He's been consistent. You look at the batting average now. You probably, if you don't pay attention, you just randomly saw his batting average, like, oh man, he sucks. No, he's actually been hitting pretty well. But it is one of the things that you're saying in that too is like you're basically saying, you're telling everybody with that comment a little bit is that the young guys we have, the young core, isn't that good. I mean, that's the way I interpret it. Like, it's just we're gonna really miss him. Like, we can't just jump off the train. Okay, when like for example, like somebody like Ryan Kreidler. Okay, Ryan Kreidler, people were like, okay, let's wait and see what happens. He's just just under 150 at bats, I believe, something to that effect. I think there's enough sample size for certain players that I think you can make a decision on already.
Yep.
But I don't know. That's where I'm just kind of confused by that comment there.
To me, that it has to do with the type of player. Ryan Kreidler, older prospect, and I hate saying that because it makes it sound like they don't have a shot, but older for a prospect type level, hasn't been able to stay. Like, he's fighting for a 40-man roster spot, like every single day. Like, he truly is. And like, I think he's fighting for his baseball life as a major leaguer. Someone like Colt Keith's not. He's got a big contract. Like, you can let that kind of, play out. Just about kind of the struggles, Raj. I was talking to Aram, who is the founder of Just Baseball, yesterday. And I was asking him, like, why do you think it is? Because he watches a ton of minors and majors. And he specifically mentioned the ABS system, automatic balls and strikes, is changing at bats and how you do at bats at the minor league level. And the zone shrinks on these guys.
Oh, yeah.
Then they get up to the majors. And not only is the pitching much worse, and you know this, you watch enough minor league baseball to understand, like, oh, Spencer Torkelson hit a home run. Oh, it's 91 right down the middle. Like,
ooh,
yeah. Not only is it much worse, but you don't have that system. The zone is a little bit bigger, but I was thinking the other day when the Phillies and Aaron Nola had that backdoor two-seamer strike 3 looking right on the paint against Justin Henry Malloy, and Malloy knows these strike zones so well. Turned his head and just walked away. He knew it. Like, this is a different level, and it's so much more talented. It just takes longer. It really does. And I think that's why I've been saying like, hey, like if Jace Young's in your plan next year to play over 100 games and you want to be competitive, I think they need to call him up sooner than later. If the season's not going anywhere, I even said DFA or shell it. Like that's how little I care about it. Like you don't even need him on the roster. He was signed for $1.5 million. Like there's not a ton of market out there for him. You know what I mean? So to me, it's get these young guys up. If they are in your plans next season to contribute at a high level and you are counting on them, why not start the clock? I know that not every single one of them's ready, but someone like a Jace Young I thought could be, or like a Parker Meadows. And
it really depends on how they use Young too, though. I mean, sorry, the line sounded like it cut out there for a second, so I wasn't sure you're done there.
sorry about that.
No, but I look at Chase Young as I think towards if the Tigers were really out of it in July, I think you see what you have with him. I just still think he still struggles a little bit with higher, not necessarily higher velocity, a little bit advanced spin. Anytime he's seen that, but his zone swing rate too was something that was like stood out. That was like I thought it'd be a little better than that.
Yeah, with him specifically, my thing is how much are you counting on him next year? And if they see those things and say we really aren't going to count on him much next year, then that's fine. But I just have a feeling the way things are trending that they're going to have him in a plan next season. And I also maybe have a different ceiling than a lot of people see with him. I think he's more of the 230, 240 hitter with pop and, overall is a good player, but I don't see him as the special piece going forward. I see him as your team's good if Jace Young's your fourth or fifth best player on it.
Yeah, and that's especially if you're going to put some veterans on his team. Oh wait, but there's more. What Harris said about that too. He said, "Well, he admitted that while signing more veterans would have been popular, it could have hindered long-term development. Quote, people would have been fired up. But in hindsight, when you look at what happened to some of those players, not all of them, but some of them would have been mistakes. I'm sorry. What? No. See, that to me, that's just basically saying, in other words, we really you can say what you want about the free agent class last year. You can say what you want. I mean, like it was like wishy-washy at best, but come on. I mean, all you're basically saying is, then why, if you felt so strongly about your young players, then how come you signed Urshelo? How come you signed, or you traded Blake Colehep, or I'm not Blake Colehep. Sorry, I got my relievers really confused.
For Cana,
Blake Holub. If you felt so strongly about your young core, how come you trade Blake Holub for a veteran Marcana? Like just some of these things are just like there's a contradictory. It's just if you're not willing to sign, like like for example, old BK just mentioned JD's raking for the Mets were like 22-3 or something like ridiculous, something like that over the last 30 odd games, whatever the case is, maybe. But it is beyond frustrating when if you're a smart GM or a GM that just like, look, you can find players in the margins, as Brandon and Dave from Bless You Boys said, you can find players that can be useful to you. But you can find those veterans that could complement your young core. But I don't see that. I see stopgap measures that are guys that are just like, I mean, even like take a flyer on somebody that's like maybe some upside to it, but I don't see any creativity. I mean, today the Tigers signed a what's the guy's name? The guy who made the major leagues after 13 odd years. They signed like a veteran minor league who's been in the system. Like he was with the Pirates last year. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Is it the like infielder guy who finally got his chance last year?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, what's that guy's name?
Now I'm looking it up right now. We have the power of the internet in front of us. Let's see here. Yeah, Drew Maggie.
That's right. Maggie. Yeah,
Drew Maggie. And you're signing these guys off the Atlantic League, and come on.
Here's the thing with me and kind of Harris, where the team stands, what this is, blah blah blah, whatever it is, just kind of a roster construction brainstorm here. How good do you think the team's going to be next year? Where do you want them to stand next year? Is next year kind of step one of like, we're actually going to try to make something here and whatnot? Okay. Then you keep Skubal. Okay. Then you spend that 15 million or whatever, 14, whatever from Flaherty, that 10, 11 from Canna, and the options that are out there, Shelby Miller, whatever. You spend some of that money and you go out and you get one or two bats. It's reasonable. That's a plan that I think could happen and would be worthy of, saying like, okay, this could work. Or is it, oh man, we drafted these high schoolers, we're waiting around, exactly sure on that last wave of prospects coming up. Well, then you got to talk about the hard trades to make, and you got to talk about more, years of being upset. It's just kind of where does he think this plan is going? To me, it's how many players on this roster right now are for sure future pieces. Offensively, not on the pitching staff. Green, Carpenter, there's a couple, but you have so many role players starting right now. Matt Vierling's a fantastic player. I've always said every World Series team has a Matt Vierling type on it. Yeah, because he's on the bench. He's the super utility guy off the bench on a good team, not a starter. I love him. I know he's playing very, very well, but we just have to be realistic about kind of where the roster is and where it's heading and what that might look like as the deadline approaches.
Yeah, there's one comment there. It was funny. I saw this on a fan sided article, which I just kind of roll my eyes at, which was the comment. In the comment was in the article it said Tigers in a weird place right now, which is true, no doubt, and they seem to be unequivocally their role on the impending deadline. They don't like spending money, and they seem to loathe to give up any of their rising stars, which is really just Skubal and Riley Green at this point. So Skubal being mentioned in trade deadline is a huge game changer. No, it's not a game changer. It's just common sense, A. And B, that whole paragraph I had a problem with. It's just
so. I have a question about you. I was thinking about this today because I knew I was coming on. I figured Skubal would come up, and I was like, I'm thinking about because like deep down, like I just don't want them to trade him just because he's so fun to all the fan part of not wanting to trade him. Business side, I get it. It does set you back. It will set you back. Yeah. Breaking news: trading one of, if not the best pitcher in baseball, will set your team back a little bit. Then I started to think the reason why everyone wants to trade him right now, besides where the team's going, is he'll never have a higher value. He's healthy and he has this much control. What if you reverse that and you are the other team saying, he's at his highest value. He's been this good. He's never been this healthy. Like there's a other side to this. And it just got me thinking, like, what if other teams are saying, like, I don't really know if we want to buy him at his literal, like, sky high value when this is the best he's ever looked. And he's coming off multiple injuries and, there's other things to it. Like, I wonder how much different his value is at this deadline, at this winter off season, and then at next year's deadline. And if it's really all that much different, to be honest with you.
I'll be honest. I will come clean. Like we talked about this last week. I didn't want to talk about Skubal trades. I was like, nah. I wanted to avoid noise. But the way you're phrasing it and the way we're just, I think the reality of the thing is that you're right. I think his value is as high as it's been. Now, that being said, do you trust Harris to get something out of it? And the question is no idea. Because right now, I mean, you can look at the Matt Vierling trade and what they got for Gregory Soto. I mean, they got a serviceable player out of it, but Nick Maton's no longer in the organization, and Donnie Sands, the same thing. He's gone. So you look at that going, crap. Okay. Well, what about trading with the Dodgers or Orioles? The Orioles would be intriguing, but are they going to grab 2 or 3 good prospects that are going to be? Because if you're going to make a trade for Skubal, you want somebody who's going to be able to play tomorrow. the next day. You want to be either like a guy who's just right now just needs major league at bats. Like somebody's talking about Christian
Herstad.
He's looked good in his third time, or he's mastered AAA, but
he had a home run tonight.
All right, well, all right, I'll take that. Like, but then you realize that if he then is at the same position or the same as far as like Parker Meadows goes, like what if he comes up here and doesn't do anything, and then you have two outfielders that don't do anything, and you're screwed on that regard.
Yeah, and the other thing about that is like when you're talking about his value, sometimes there's too high a value that you can't get it. If I were to say I live in Lexington, Kentucky, if I had Ernest Hemingway's typewriter, I could not get that value out of it in Lexington, Kentucky. There's just no one here would pay it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what I'm trying to say is, oh, he has 2.5 years of control. He's the best. He's this, he's that. Jesus Luzardo got injured. That's one less lefty on the market. There may just not be that team willing to pay the fair value out there because it is rightfully so incredibly high. So would you rather take a lesser package or would you rather hold on, wait till the offseason, wait, I don't know. But that, it always comes down to the value. And like you're saying with Harris, like, will he make the right move? It's just, we haven't seen enough, in my opinion, to say, yeah, I think he will, or no, he won't. Because that Lee trade is looking pretty good so far for a rental pitcher who was, Lorenzen's good, but everyone kind of knew what he was. And, I think he's done okay. I think he's just been fine. Overall, like, I don't know. It's just kind of tough to see him getting the right value for Skubal.
Yeah, and I would, if like a trade like Lee, for example, Lee is a guy who I think could see some time in the major league level. That being said, there's still even there's not a trade where you've seen it on the impact on the major league level.
Yeah,
I mean, like outside of Verlaine, let's face it here. If they did a trade, let's say a classic, for example, I always think about how Dave Dabrowski was able to get somebody you were like the Carl Skean trade. I always think about that trade, for example. That trade at the time was like, well, he's put up some good numbers in Seattle, and he was all right. And then he got significantly better here. I mean, the Carl Skean trade to me is one of my favorite Dave Dabrowski trades of all time. They needed a shortstop. They got their shortstop. And that's why, like you mentioned that too. It's like, well, we just traded when we needed to trade something. And I don't see Harris. Harris, I think, was trying to be the smartest guy in the room all the time. And you mentioned this earlier about, like these young GMs that have to have this, like, no one's going to screw me over. Yeah. And same thing.
I don't want to get pushed around. I got to set my ground early. Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with the YouTube user here. Tiger fans are still traumatized by the Verlander trade. And Henry, about Jack Flaherty, who is taking the mound right now as we speak, I hope with the Flaherty trade, I hope that if they do trade Flaherty, that they would at least get one starter, at least one like starting positional player out of that one, and out of the major league level, because I know they're gonna sit there and say, well, Flaherty's just a 1-year contract. Okay, fine, but he is pitching way better than Michael Lorenzen did. I believe he's under 30. So he's not, and he's a guy who's coming back in the form. And if you look at some of his advanced numbers, they're outstanding. I mean, if they let him pitch the rest of the year, of course, Tigers don't get anything. But go ahead, Clay.
Can't they qualify offer him? So if I'm a team who trades for him, I get the 1 year out of it, this run, whatnot. It doesn't work out. I think
you're correct.
Those who don't know, like if they offer him the qualifying offer, he can accept it. 1 year, $18 million or whatever it ends up being. You have a good pitcher for 1 year at a reasonable price. If they decline it, then that team who just traded the Tigers or prospect gets a comp pick back, which very well could end up being a similar level prospect. Yeah. So theoretically, like maybe he is able to get, like you're saying, like, man, we don't really want to give up, insert the player who's blocked or struggling, who's 25 years old. We don't want to give him up, but we might be able to, there's that back part of their brain going, we can get that qualifying offer. we can recoup the top 40 pick in the draft or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, and that's where also depending on the team, if they're good enough in development to get that going too, that's also if they can trust the process with that. But as far as what they can get for Flaherty and Skubal goes, look, if that's the case, even like trading like guys, well, the guys are trying to think of like for like the Carson Kellys of the world to make room for Dylan Dingler, just do what you have with that. I think what you're telling fans at that point is like the PR spin on it is going to be ridiculous. Well, it's just we're not in contention this year. It's just going to be another thing. In reality, it didn't have to be that way. I think the reason why I think Tiger fans are, I will say this, Tiger fans in general are a lot smarter what people give them credit for. They're not fooled by bullshit. It's just one of those things where it's like after so much time and all the things that have been happening since the 2019 season, the amount of prospects that have flamed out until recently, it is beyond frustrating to no end. And so I think that if the Tigers were competing and they had made some sort of attempt to like fix it instead of just these excuses like, well, I'm paraphrasing here, but like just it sounded like to me, it's like, well, we want to make sure we're making the right move. Then so when is that going to be then? What is that going to look like? What you're telling your fans is essentially we're too scared to do anything.
Exactly. And I think that this young GMs are going to learn, and you hear about them in interviews. If you listen to a lot of, and this goes across multiple sports, they will say, and you see it in their actions. How often do we see a football team lose 2 linebackers and next year they have 7 new ones in camp because that GM saw, man, we got short there. I'm never going to let that happen again. It's a learning curve for them as well. I think Harris put way too much stock into the idea of Colt Keith hitting right away and Parker Meadows being able to hold his own and be a starting center fielder. I think those two things had a little bit too much stock in them. Then you have, those have both, Keith's, like you mentioned, has come around. Meadows is in AAA. And then you have Spencer Torkelson, who they thought they could count on. And what's the backup plan there? It's Barron in the minors. It's 36-year-old Mark Canha, who is also age has caught up with. And it's Gio Urshela, the under 700 OPS singles hitter, fancy Harold Castro, Gio Urshela. I just think that he did not come up with a strong enough plan for plan B. Plan A, he thought would all work. Plan B and C were a little weak, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know what, though? That just continues with Avila, because Avila didn't have a plan either, and they just threw Torkelson into the fire, and they really were just like, oh, we'll see what happens. And they rushed. You can sit there and say they rushed in the majors. Absolutely. And there's more to it than just Torque also refusing to change, his swing and the mechanics and everything too. I mean, it's cool to hear. Don't get me wrong. 30 home runs, great. 231, not so great. But the defensive lapses from here and there, those things, they add up. But I think you're right. I believe you're 100% correct about this. But it just continues the trend of the last 5 years. The Tigers have not had a backup plan. They have not been inventive enough to think of something else to the point where they have an alternative, and they haven't. And that's what's frustrating to me. You can make all the progress you want in the farm system. That's great and all, but you're not going to tell me right now down in AAA. I mean, even right now, it was mentioned Eddie's and are back on the IL.
Yeah,
you don't have you really don't have an option for short right now. You really don't have an option for space. You're going to just wing it, and they're not even inventive enough. I mean, it's just, even Cleveland right now, Cleveland's got the 50 wins. They just signed Matthew Boyd, former Tiger. They signed him today. You know what's going to happen, Clay? You know what's going to happen, right? He is going to be a guy that they're going to use as an opener who can go maybe 1 or 2 times through the lineup and just like, hey, air it out. Because Cleveland knows how to do that, and watch.
And they're thinking ahead. They're saying Tristan McKenzie may need rest before the playoffs. He's been kind of injured. Matt Boyd, go out there and be the August guy. We'll give you some money. if we win the World Series, we'll ship you a ring, buddy. They're thinking a step ahead is what they're doing. They're realizing Ben Lively, I don't really know if he'll hold up like long term. And they're seeing that and going out and getting a proven guy, a lefty with some funk that they may be able to get in and change something. I feel like everyone said that about Matt Boyd at some point in the past 4 years. But I think the plan or lack thereof with the Tigers is really showing up right now. And think of where they'd be. Not that like Winslow Perez has been like, the most incredible player in the world, but he's been one of the better players when you truly look at the entire lineup. Where would they be if he didn't just kind of happen to pop up for them? You know what I mean? And I know that you all have tweeted and covered him, and I've liked him as well, but I don't think that anyone projected him to be kind of an everyday or getting a ton of reps this season like he has. And he's been good. Where would they be without him? It's just been a lineup that I always say we'll look back at this lineup in 5 years. Like, you'll see someone post it and we'll laugh at it thinking, oh my gosh, man, is this really what they were doing?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be it's a thing where the end of the podcast, Clay, the one I think out of the times I've done the show this year, I reflect on sometimes like going, okay, keep it real, keep it not too cynical or anything. But after the comments I saw this week, the Tiger, it's heading into July. So next week's already July. It's already crazy how time has gone by pretty fast. It's just, you look at it and you just go, you want to look for something like some rays of hope, something to hang your head on. I can't. Right now, I'm at that point where I'm looking at the farm system right now. I'm looking at trying to look at West Michigan. Okay, there's some positives there with pitching, but the hitting right now has been across the system, with the exception of Lakeland. Lakeland has been the oasis that people want. I mean, McGonigal, Clark, you have Basenio. There's a lot of things you can talk about Lakeland and go, all right, cool. But the rest, I mean, outside of Lee and Double-A, it's awful. It's awful. And is it like lower bottom of the tier farm system bad? No. There's some upside to it. There's some pitching. There's some things you can hang on the farm system. But on a major league level, I just night after night I sit there and I don't tweet live anymore because I think sometimes on X or Twitter, I'm just still gonna call it Twitter because it's the only thing that makes sense to me. On Twitter, it's just you're speaking to a void because what's the point? It's just like you're seeing the same thing every time. It's the same kind of at bats, these quick at bats. You've seen all this great pitching being wasted because, quite frankly, you weren't imagined enough to do anything on offense, and you were not able to pull the trigger last year on whatever happened with the Eduardo Rodriguez deal. We'll never know, but what was going to happen is the Tigers were going to get a catcher, and it's just, YouTube user said it best. He says, "I think our best stuff from a position standpoint, being A-ball tells you a lot about how far away we really are." And I mean, as much as people recognize us for not being, hey, everybody, the farm system doing good. We're going to keep it as honest as possible because it's a disservice to do anything like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And, the more, and that's the thing about following prospects is how often do you get excited about a guy in single A? Oh man, this guy's going to be good. And then it doesn't take that much longer before you lose your excitement when he's in double, triple A and it's not producing the same results. And, and it's not just the Tigers. I follow every single team very closely, watch podcasts about all of them. And you see this across, it's what happens when you take 17, 18-year-olds, put them through a expedited course, more or less, of how to get ready for major league pitching. And the majority of them are going to fail. The majority of them are not going to reach it. So it's disheartening. It sucks because you look over at Baltimore, who's winning, and you look at their farm system and they're producing, and you look at who they have coming up the pipe, and they're over here saying, we got to move these guys. We don't have 40-man roster spots. You look over in Cleveland. You see similar things, and I get it. It's one of those deals where you just want that for the Tigers. It just isn't there right now, and that's the thing. They have a new system or a new GM, and we'll see what he can do. I'm a believer that it takes multiple seasons before you can really judge a GM. So I'm still on the fence about him, but I mean, this is a deadline. Like if he comes out with a Flaherty return that's does wow us, like hey, this was a smart return. It's not just a couple of flyers, some guy who throws 98 with no control and will flame out. I just want to see what that return looks like, and then one more trade of something creative. I don't know what that means yet, but do something to spark or change up what's there right now.
Surprise people. That's what you want because for example, it's I look at the Reds. Like the Reds farm system was supposed to be very, very good, and has been. It's kind of flamed out. Like watching Louisville.
Oh, they're awful.
Oh my God! Clay? It's just like from three. It's just like it reminds me of Louisville when Brendan Flanagan was there a couple years back, and like that's a flashback for you. There's Mike. Mike, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on?
We were talking a little bit. I just wanted to. We'll get your takes. I wanted to get your takes on Harris before we get out of here on what he said today, this week. But, the Reds are a team that I thought were going to be better than what they're anticipating, and now Marte's on suspension, right? Is that right?
So tonight was his first game back, or they're winning 11-5. But the Reds had a situation where last season they brought up 5 or 6 rookies, and all of them graduated. So, weakened farm system, and then everyone's just kind of stunk in their farm system this year. Everyone's taken a nosedive down. Connor Phillips, top 100 prospect, had a 10-something ERA and got shipped back to like Arizona. Like he's not going to be pitching for a while.
Yeah, Rhett Lauder.
So it's been a weird situation in Cincinnati.
Yeah, Rhett Lauder.
Yeah, he's had games where he struck out 9, then has back-to-back games of 0 strikeouts.
So, Pat, I don't know if you saw what Scott Harris said earlier this week on the podcast, on the Take a Seat podcast. But I wanted to ask you real quick before we get out of here. Based off what Scott Harris was saying, he was talking about how we have to be patient. Essentially, the fans are impatient. I think it's almost insulting their intelligence a little bit.
My apologies. I didn't see the full comments, but I don't like when any person and any GM or president of any ops in any sport preaches patience. Especially one that hasn't been here for very long. I mean, I guess when you're trying to put a plan into place, what he's really trying to say is like, hey, let me do my job. Like I've been here a year and a half. I've been here 2 years, ultimately that's what he's trying to say. But what fans hear when they hear patience is they hear, oh, it's going to be better one day. And, for a baseball team that's been pretty mediocre for 10 years now, it's just tone deaf. That's all. And it happens in every sport. This is definitely not a baseball thing. It's something we've heard in basketball quite a bit recently, and the Pistons have been kind of in the same boat, except they've been way worse. But it just happens in the same way. It's completely tone deaf to say anything like that. And I think if you're smart, you just stay away from any kind of comments like that. Yeah. That's how I've always looked at those comments.
No, you almost like a trap comment there. And Chris, by the way, chimed in. Chris Brown listening on the way back. Can't give in terms of Flaherty, can't give him a qualifying offer to a player acquired in a midseason trade. Tigers can't give him one. Can give him one. Anyone they trade to can't.
Okay.
So that's how it works.
That's good to clarify that. Yeah, I misspoke on that earlier.
Yeah. I wasn't 100% about that. Usually Chris is there when it becomes between the two of us. He's the contract man when it comes to those things. But no, and the other thing I want to ask you about this week, the offense, Mike, in terms of what you saw with the Phillies, there's nothing new. It's just the same old. But was there anything that stood out to you this week against the Phillies?
I mean, I loved the Tarik Skubal Ranger Suarez matchup. That was a baseball game, and it lasted 2 hours and 5 minutes. Why is it such a good pitching matchup? Such a great game. Look,
Beautiful.
you say it's great that it ends in 2 hours, but for me, I was like, that's it. It's over because it went by so quickly. Both their starts, it just went. They were dealing, and I know the Tigers put up 4 quick runs, but I mean, lasting 2 hours, I was just a little disappointed in that. And it just sucks. It really is every 5 days now. Like, I'm not trying to discredit Flaherty or Reese Olson, despite some of his recent struggles, but really, it really does feel like they get up for one game every 5 days, and it's the one that Tarik Skubal starts, and that's the only one that you really can expect them to do anything anymore. So I wish I had the stats to back that up right in front of me, but really, it just that's all it is. They need. I mean, I'm not going to get into what they need. That could take an entire podcast. Just the offense is what it is, and it kind of goes back to him saying, "Be patient." I guess I do want to. I've always said this since the beginning of the year. When the second Scott Harris said before the season that like he's going to let the young guys struggle, this is exactly what he was saying was going to happen. So whether you like it or not, Scott Harris told us this is exactly what was going to happen this season. And I mean, considering they're the 27th ranked offense, they're 6 games below 500. Like, if you look at it in a vacuum with just that, I mean, that doesn't seem that bad, but this is exactly what he said was going to happen. And it's getting to the point where it's really rough to watch. I mean, I guess it's been there for a month now, but it's hard to talk about. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I love doing these shows, but man, it was a lot more fun when I thought that they were a little bit better of a baseball team prepping for this show. Like, man, it's just a little bit more fun when they're more interesting. But like you said, it's just a lot more of the same, and it just doesn't seem like they're getting any better or really any worse either. So it's just, I mean, who knew replacing Javi Baez with Ryan Kreidler would be a negligible difference, really, Like, it's the exact same production. So, I don't know. Everything's stagnant almost, and that's a huge disappointment.
Oh, look at this. Chris Brown just like flying in from Lansing. Look at that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
Right in time to wrap up the show.
No. Mike, by the way, you're brutal, gentlemen. You know what's brutal? Badu, Malloy, McKinstry, Malloy or Badu 119, 145, and 195 batting average. That is.
Well, yeah, you know what I got? The Tigers offensive players have a total of 4.6 WAR. I mean, this is Baseball Reference WAR. Love it or hate it, Riley Green has 3.6 of that. The rest of the offensive players have 1.3 WAR. I mean, that just puts it into perspective. Like, Riley Green really is their only. I mean, he's an above average player, clearly, if he's worth that much right now. But the rest of it, there's not really any guy that's sticking out. Kerry Carpenter, actually, I'm pretty sure Kerry Carpenter is one of that as well, and he's on the IL. So without those two, they are literally a replacement level offense. That's what WAR says for them, and I don't think it's really that far off. Love it or hate it.
Yeah, I know, Chris. Or Chris, what did you see at West Michigan? Because I just saw the went final. West Michigan having the same offensive problems the Tigers are.
Yeah, they scored 1 billion runs on Tuesday. In the last 2 games I went to, they've done nothing on offense. Today was 3 hits, all by Jim Jarvis. And they lost a game when they gave up 2 hits. Jaden Ham was good as 6 innings. He actually was kind of uncharacteristically wild early on. But 2 of the runs came on a double that was a flyout that Patrick Lee just misjudged. I think it's his first time playing center field in Lansing and totally took the wrong step and flew over his head. But other than that, Ham really settled down, looked good. And then Yasber Sanchez came in and looked like a viable big league reliever if he could just throw a couple more strikes. But yeah, absolutely nothing from the offense. Lots of early swings, weak contact. Not encouraging there, no.
Yeah, that Metal Bug. It's been a while. By the way, good to see Metal Bug in our chat. It's been a while since we've seen him in here live, and he mentioned the 1997 Tigers had a better team. he ain't far off from that. I mean, I know, like, for some of you guys, or especially Mike, I don't know about you, Clay, but some of those early night, like those 90 teams could not pitch to save them lives at all. But it's saying something if we're going back to 1997 for that. But even it's funny, the biggest rush about calling Justin Herman Malloy, and now he's struggling a little bit. Now fans are just like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen this at every level, right? Where everybody just always wants to call up whoever's performing well in the minors and call them up to a next level, call them up to the big leagues, and they get to the big leagues where it's very, very hard to play baseball, and they don't do well, and then they want to send them away as soon as possible. And it's just there's I don't know. I understand, like, there's a lack of patience in that regard. I understand that people are the patience is wearing thin in general because baseball has been so bad in Detroit for a decade. But it's the young guys aren't going to save you, really, at least not this year.
My question is, like, all right, if Malloy's not in the lineup, like, who's replacing him that's suddenly making a big difference on the outcome of the game? I would rather personally just see Malloy and see him, or learn if he can adjust, see the differences he makes over time, than seeing somebody else who, may not have as much of a potential impact in the future. To me, it's Malloy showed enough in back-to-back years in AAA that he's earned this shot. And like I said, there's no one that he's like blocking that's drastically going to change the outcome of the game. So let him get his run, let him learn from his mistakes, and then see how it looks, as it continues on. We saw struggles across the board. It's not just the fringe prospects. I mean, Pete Crow Armstrong for the Cubs is a top 10, 15 prospect in all of baseball who has struggled out of the gate as well. It's not so uncommon that fans should just say all these prospects are bad, or the development's awful, the hitting coaches are awful, whatever it may be that we see on that great app. To me, it's, let's see these guys settle in. There's nothing to lose.
So we're going to shift gears when we're going to end the podcast, but I'm going to ask you guys all a question. I'm going to ask you guys. So Chris, I'll ask you first. How many times in the last Tigers versus the Angels, because they're out and they're a little way right now. They're on the road against the Angels. And so I want to ask you, how many times do you think in the last, or I think a good round number, you think the Tigers in the last 10 years have had over, or like done 500 or better, or not, have done over 500 against the Angels for the season? How many times do you think?
Have in a season? How many times have they had a better than 500?
Yeah, I don't know.
Twice?
I was trying to struggle with saying it correctly, and I couldn't. So
maybe
twice
maybe twice. And I want to say that maybe once. I remember. I thought one year they did it was the year when they lost 110 games or whatever. Their worst year, they happened to actually beat the Angels.
Okay, so you're saying in the last 10 years. Okay,
so going back to 2014, you say
2014, yeah,
maybe twice that they've had a winning record against the Angels. If this is just in California or overall?
Overall. Okay, you know what? Yeah, let's do away actually. So, how many times in California or Los Angeles technically? Or is it?
Yeah, I'll say 2.
You'll say 2. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mike, how many times do you?
I'd say 1
in the last 10 years?
They're just criminally terrible on the West Coast, unless you're Javi Baez in Arizona, apparently.
Like
okay.
Bob Barkered me.
I'll go 0 then.
Okay.
There it is.
All right. So how many times so this is where it is. Okay, count twice.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. So
exactly right.
So the Tigers were 3-0 against the Angels last year on the road. They swept the Angels. Yeah, last year.
Oh, geez.
And then they were 2-1 against the Angels on the road in 2019. Overall, on the overall side of things, they've been 3-3 against in the last 2 seasons. But how many times the Tigers have done over 500 overall in the last 10 years?
Yeah, I would again. I'm gonna let the other guys go.
I think twice is still the right answer, probably.
All right. I'll go 3.
You go 3?
I'll go
Chris?
3. I'll claim it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. If I can't pick twice, then I can't go 4, and I can't go 1. So I'll just go with 2 again.
Wrong.
All right.
So it is none. And the answer is none. So
overall, wow.
Overall, yeah.
I didn't
so
think I could
overall,
go under, but I could.
So so since 2000, since the year 2000, let's just go back to the year 2000. The Tigers have had a winning record over 500, not just 500, over 500 against the Angels. It was 2009. They finished 5-4. In 2010, 6-4. Prior to 2009, the last time the Tigers had a winning record against the Angels over 500 was 6-5 in 1997.
Huge bummer. I was just watching Carlos Guillen's bat flip against Jared Weaver. I loved when they played the Angels when Jared Weaver was on the Angels, man. I loved those games.
Yeah.
I can't remember hating an athlete as much as I hated Jared Weaver. Like 2011, 2012, that era. Oh, man. That is some fun stuff. And I don't really hate any. There's no rivalries like that I can think of right now anymore.
So
maybe like Reese Hoskins.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's not that much of that high tensionness to it, is there?
Yeah, the Angels back then as a whole, it felt it reminded me of like the Pistons Pacers. They weren't in the same division, so it wasn't quite that heated, but there was definitely, the Angels were always really good, and Weaver was always kind of vying with Verlander for like top pitcher in the American League, and then that one particular game when it all came to a head was spectacular.
Yeah, there was the home series too was interesting too. The Angels were always played the Tigers really good at home or on the road. The Angels played the Tigers really well on the road, but outside of last year in 2019, the Tigers last had a winning season prior to 2019. The last time the Tigers had a winning record on the road in Anaheim prior to 2019 was 1993.
So yeah, again, that's baseball's dumb. 2019, they won 47 games. What was it? 49 games. Yeah.
So by the way, we did get a scouting report on Cole Turney. So there's a couple of scouting reports coming on the Tiger Minded Report. So there's that. What else we got? Oh, I'm finishing up the Andrew Navigato should be called up. So if you're a Patreon member, or if you want to join our Patreon, it's right behind our paywall for that, and they'll be up on. Or also if you're a YouTube Super subscriber member, so I think OBK might be. I think there's some people in the chat this evening, on here or on a minor league report. You can go ahead and check that out. There'll be Roberto Campos 1-2 coming up, but not because of him coming up to the Tigers. Goodness no, if he deserves a call up to Double-A soon. So. Got that. Clay, thanks so much for joining us. What do you want to pimp out? What's going on over at Just Baseball?
Man, they're doing draft coverage, and I'm writing about all kinds of stuff. I just wrote about the Orioles, and I'll have some Tiger stuff coming as well, and Reds and A's, and anything else that they can convince me to do. So I appreciate you all having me on. It's always a fun time.
Yeah, I saw you. We have a trip to Mexico down. We were supposed to hang out last time, and then just stuff happened. And then Mike, I was going to ask you, how was Electric Forest, by the way?
I mean, it was great, but we rained out a day and a half of music, so hasn't happened since 2017.
I was going to say, it seemed like there's a lot of storms out that way, man.
Yep, they closed it down early, man.
Was it just danger to the listeners, the fans there, because they don't? I assume that there are stages, right?
Yeah, but it's like all outside and lightning outside with venues.
Everybody just wear their rubber suits. You'll be fine.
Yeah,
nice and cool.
Well, and appreciate everybody coming on and hang out with us for a little bit during the Tigers game. Right now, the Tigers are in the bottom of the third. Angels up 1-0 as Miguel Sano hit a home run, and I totally and utterly forgot that Miguel Sano was the thing.
Well, he wasn't until he came back with the Angels this year. He trimmed up and I don't know.
He hasn't. He spent the whole last year in the minor leagues, didn't he? Or was he not play at all last year?
I don't remember if he was injured or in the minors or a little bit of both. Or
then he missed a decent chunk of this year with an injury as well. But he's kind of like, I mean, he's not back, but he's on his road back. I like it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, OPS is 726. Oh.
I mean, heck, that'd put him third place on the Tigers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's only 31.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather do that than what they have currently right now. I mean, no offense to Gio Urshela, but it is what it is. But thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. And like I said, there's a bunch of extra bonus content coming out. And go to Just Baseball. Check out their great content, justbaseball.com. Great Twitter account, too, as well. They do some fantastic work. And I'm not just saying it because Clay and I are friends, but honestly, it's just a great site. And they do a better job than some, again, fan-sided sites. I'm just going to rip. By the way, I'm just going to rip on fan-sided for the rest of my days now. I mean, I'm still working there technically, but I'm over it. I'm just sick and tired of you want good quality content. It's not going to be clickbait. You want some good quality content that's going to provide some value. Go to justbaseball.com. There you go. They do their homework and they do the research and they do it what I think is good writing and what.
Yeah. We appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey, there's a guy on your staff that has a Baseball Writers Association pass. We should use that. Nah. Anyway. We'll talk about that offline. Until then, have a good night, everybody.